Hi, this is going to be a video response but also a channel recommendation. I'm going to recommend the House of Hauntology channel. It's a channel that specializes, at least at the time of this video, it specializes in solo role-playing games, specifically macabre, dark, gory solo role-playing game content. He produces these videos with inspirational material. Some of those videos also include some elements that you can use to build your own disturbing tables for solo RPGs. So definitely check out his channel. And I think it was today, he uploaded this video where he talked about how you can sometimes get a bit too stuck, perhaps even obsessed, I would say, when using random tables. His premise is that it stifles or hinders your creativity, your imagination. So I think this is an interesting topic. I will try to give my take on things. The link to his video will be in the description. Definitely check it out because he encourages solo role players to share their opinions on this particular subject. Okay. I think that when it comes to random tables, they are somewhat similar to what I consider to be good guidelines or perhaps an approach to using rules in tabletop role-playing games. In any role-playing game system, the mechanics, the rules, in my opinion, they need to fulfill two main purposes. They must be fun, and they need to have a purpose, a reason to be. So when you are playing your favorite RPG, let's say in a normal situation, in a traditional situation, when you're playing with your group, if the rules are not fun, you might as well switch to another system or make some modifications to them. And the purpose of the rules are to support the actions of the player characters, the immersion, the story, everything. So the rules are just there to support that storytelling / interaction experience with the game world. So maybe you decide to, you say, I'm going to run at the enemy with my battle axes at full speed, and you're using the charge rules then. You are not exactly thinking, at least when it comes to immersion. It's much better, in my opinion, to imagine what your character is about to do, and then you use the rules of the system to represent that. Maybe you want to knock down an opponent, then you use the trip rules. Maybe you just want to tackle the opponent or wrestle with the opponent. You have all of those rules right there. And in some systems that do not have that simulationist side, or perhaps even crunchy side, some would say, you handle things depending on the context and the situation, on rulings rather than rules, improvising some things. So I think the tables in a solo RPG work somewhat similarly. They need to be fun. If you have a favorite set of tables, maybe you like the results of a table for a Call of Cthulhu sort of role-playing game, or for a post-apocalyptic role-playing game. If you enjoy using those tables, if you find it fun to see those perhaps even nonsensical or crazy results, you should definitely use them. And there are some very specific tables. I've mentioned Ken Wickham's tables. You know, he has tables for almost everything, but in a very, almost as if he's putting things under a microscope. They are so precise and nuanced. You can determine almost everything in the game world using his tables. I think this also has to do with what the House of Hauntology premise was, that sometimes your creativity could be hindered by that. So when it comes to playing a solo role-playing game, I think that if your, let's call it your subconscious mind, or whatever you want to call it, suddenly introduces something into a particular scene or encounter, you should go with it if it surprises you. I think surprise is a powerful element when it comes to playing solo role playing games, because maybe you are not sure how to begin your adventure. Maybe you are generating everything dynamically. You are not playing a solo adventure, or you're not running a module that you play with other people. You are playing it using the whatever solo rules that you want. I'm going to put several examples in the description on how to run different modules. But let's say that you are generating everything. You're not exactly sure how to start the adventure. So maybe you take out the FlexTail solo adventuring toolkit. And this all depends on your choice. This book is just as good as the free to download TriCube Tales from DriveThruRPG, which is just like a few pages, and it contains everything that you would ever need in a solo RPG session. But when it comes to people like me that like to have all sorts of tools and resources for whatever reason, maybe sometimes you're a bit stuck when it comes to the plot line, what sorts of thematic elements you want to introduce, or maybe you are just a bit tired. Maybe you have been working for a long time that day during working overtime, and you just want to enjoy a solo RPG without putting too much effort into it. Then these larger volumes could be quite helpful. You just go to a particular section, and now you can determine the quest. You can determine the direction of a particular adventure in the map, the northwest or whatever, the weather. House of Hauntology actually, he mentioned this, that do you really need to determine the weather? So it all goes back to what I was saying. Maybe I just made a few rolls and I obtained the result that it happens in a forest. Oh, maybe my character is wandering through the forest, but as I am thinking of that, maybe I picture this. It's a rainy day. It's raining. If you like that, if you felt like, yes, like it would be a fun thing to do, to play as your character in a rainy day moving through the forest, go for it. Don't roll to determine the weather. If you feel comfortable with that, just go with the flow. And maybe when you thought of those trees, you suddenly imagined this troll or hag. It could be anything coming out of the trees. Go with it. Especially if it surprises you, if you think, why did I think about that? So definitely you don't need a roll for that. And that goes into the other aspect of tables in a solo role-playing game. They are there to perhaps support gameplay rather than dictate gameplay. House of Hauntology mentioned that you could create your own custom tables, and of course this is a viable solution, even encouraged. But like I said, maybe sometimes you do not have the time, or you're not feeling like very enthusiastic about creating tables for a particular adventure, especially if you already have a collection of tables for that. So it's all up to you. If you are playing a very specific adventure, like, yes, a very specific setting with all sorts of complicated plot lines, maybe it's much better for you to create your table using some elements from those very specific situations. But if you want to handle things in a general sense, you could have even a universal table to handle that. And yes, sometimes you can get a bit like House of Hauntology said, you could go down the rabbit hole. You could get too deep into tables. It's all about what you need, but asking yourself if you really need that. Like, yes, maybe you're playing a post-apocalyptic setting or adventure or whatever. Within that setting, it's quite common to see abandoned vehicles, and you want to know what's inside of the trunk of an abandoned car. There is actually, I don't remember the publisher for these sets of tables, but the publisher is constantly producing these 100 results for different elements concerning different genres and themes. And they actually obtained one of those drive-through RPG offers that, oh, for 50 cents you can purchase this table of 100 results for what you can find in the trunk of a post-apocalyptic car. And I immediately took advantage of that offer, and now I have that for when I am playing Mutant Epoch or Gamma World. Now I have that. If I find an abandoned vehicle, I'm going to use that table because I like to surprise myself, but it's definitely not necessary. So it's all up to you. If you feel like those tables, like House of Hauntology said, maybe they are stifling or weakening your creativity, your imagination, don't rely on them too much. The power of imagination is very important for these sorts of experiences. I think there are a lot of people that truly do not explore the full potential of their imagination. They could be reading novels, they could be playing role-playing games, they could be, yes, reading manga or whatever, and they truly do not think about those details that make the adventure or the situation come alive. What I mentioned, for example, in my recent session of the solo campaign featuring From the Ashes, you start to experience what the character smells, sees, what you hear through that character. It truly feels like some sort of strange astral projection into this fictional entity. And that's when you truly feel the magic of role-playing games. It's even greater than virtual reality. Nowadays, it's quite common to see all of those virtual reality games, but it still feels a bit like a video game. They can be quite realistic, but I don't think, well, maybe some people do. When it comes to smelling and touching, it's always going to be a bit lacking. But when you strengthen or exercise your imagination, those virtual reality games could also benefit from that. You could imagine other things, trick your senses while you are playing those games. And role-playing games exercise your imagination, your creativity, your sense of immersion, if you could call it like that, because of the more austere, or some would say less technologically advanced components of a role-playing game. You only need your pencil, your paper, your eraser, and whatever system that you are using, or perhaps a game master emulator. And that way you encourage your own creativity, your imagination, to create this almost like a pocket dimension. I would even call it like that. So yes, I agree with House of Hauntology that you should question yourself, ask yourself if you really need certain tables. And I would add that you should also ask yourself if you have fun using those tables. If you have fun using those tables, keep using them. House of Hauntology also mentioned that if you enjoy using those tables, definitely go for it, and also employ those tools to get you out of some sort of loop, or maybe you're a bit stuck. You don't know what comes next, because part of those the purpose of those tables is that you want to replace a game master. If you are playing a solo role-playing game as a player character or a group of player characters with an emulated game master, but maybe it's the other way around, like my From the Ashes solo campaign. Maybe you are playing as a solo game master with an emulated player character or emulated player characters. Then you need to perhaps make some rolls to determine the decisions of those characters. So it's all up to you. It's all about your enjoyment and what works when it comes to coming up with those results for encounters, situations, and anything that is not handled via checks. That's why you have skill checks, you have different abilities and powers and spells to solve all sorts of situations. So yes, a very interesting topic. Definitely check out the House of Hauntology channel and his video. Remember, the link will be in the description below. Thank you for watching this video. If you have any comments or questions, please let me know. And thank you so much to those of you that have been supporting the channel by sending drive-thru RPG gift certificates. If anyone else wants to further support the channel, the information on how to do that will be in the description below. Once again, thank you, and see you later.